All right, this is a serious ping pong game, right? There's a lot of back and forth in this case, and I do need to point out that you filed amicus briefings in Georgia arguing that Graham does not have complete immunity in this case. So what does today's ruling actually mean for Senator Graham? Will he testify or not on Tuesday?
Well, he won't testify on Tuesday, Fred, but I don't think the ruling is good news for him either. He won't testify because there's a temporary stay while the district court, the appellate court, sent it back down to the district court.
As expected, Lindsey Graham appears to have found himself a favorable court. The senator just got the Court of Appeals to block him from testifying before the Georgia grand jury investigating Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. Now that block is only temporary. Welcome into TYT's Overruled. I'm legal analyst Adrienne Lawrence. Less than a week after a federal judge in Georgia ruled that Lindsey Graham must testify before the state grand jury, a federal appellate court temporarily blocked the senator from having to testify before that special grand jury. Now, this ruling gives the Republican from South Carolina temporary reprieve from being questioned under oath about his 2 phone calls to the Georgia Secretary of State about finding those extra votes for Donald Trump. But again, it's only temporary. Let's talk about what the appellate court ruled with a quick refresher on the parties' positions. In addition to claiming that the calls were benign, Graham argues that he's exempt from testifying under the Constitution's speech and debate clause, which protects lawmakers from having to answer about their legitimate legislative actions. Now, of course, the Atlanta prosecutor says that she's not going to ask anything about Graham's lawmaking or legislative actions at all, but she simply wants to talk about the calls that he made in furtherance of Trump overturning the 2020 presidential election. That would seem pretty logical, right? Well, the lower federal court agreed with the prosecutor, allowing the questioning to move forward. But of course, Graham has to go full Trump, which means court shop. And the Republican-stacked 11th Circuit Court of Appeals gave him some wiggle room. Here's what the appellate court ruled. First, the court ruled a federal district court must determine whether Mr. Graham is entitled to a partial quashal or modification of the subpoena to appear before the special purpose grand jury, based on the speech and debate clause issue. After that, the appeals court said it will take up the issue for further consideration. Translation: the Court of Appeals appears to be helping Graham delay testimony even further. It's basically telling the lower court to outline what areas of questioning the prosecutor can ask Graham, and then to go back and the appellate court will consider things further. This really seems to be nonsense, as the prosecutors already made clear that they plan to ask Graham about the phone calls to Georgia's Secretary of State, not any questions about Graham's lawmaking. Plus, if the prosecutors were to breach that promise, Graham could simply assert his legislative privilege before the grand jury. It would seem to be that simple. All said, this order from the appellate court seems like nothing more than an effort to interfere with the accountability, even though Graham has been informed that he is not a target of the investigation, but merely a witness. So why is Graham so afraid? And why is the Atlanta prosecutor even waiting for Graham's testimony? First, Graham is likely afraid to testify because he's going to have to plead the Fifth Amendment. It really seems that, hey, based on his actions, the senator was attempting to interfere with Georgia's election by calling the Secretary of State twice, seeking additional votes for Donald Trump. That's just my opinion, but I really think that's why Graham isn't necessarily here to testify. He doesn't want to end up being a target. And yeah, so he'd plead the Fifth. Now, the prosecutors can proceed without Graham having his say, but they still want to hear from him, in large part because the testimony that he has provided, the things he's said in public in terms of statements he's made in the media, they conflict with what the Secretary of State said about those phone calls. So the prosecutor's looking for some insight and hopefully to resolve those issues for the grand jury. And this is also why they want the information. Per the New York Times, they also want him to answer other questions about what they have called the multi-state coordinated efforts to influence the results of the November 2020 election in Georgia and elsewhere. Prosecutors have said in court documents that they expect Mr. Graham's testimony to reveal additional sources of information related to their investigation. In the event that the appellate court ultimately allows the questioning to go forward, I think you can fully expect Graham to petition all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. How do you think he'd fare before that conservative stacked high court? You let me know in the comments below. Hit that like and follow button. And thanks for watching.